All right. So, I'm going to be discussing the U.S. national debt and the effects that it's had both on the country and on consumers. So, the U.S. debts amassed to some $28 trillion over the course of our existence, and much of that within the past 20 years. This is correlated with U.S. consumer debts being at record highs, and, it kind of makes one wonder if there's a correlation between those two. And with this, you've seen a lot of effects over time, such as stagnant growth of wages in the economy, and inflation, and retirement savings being, quite stagnant because people tend to rely on Social Security. And as far as the inflation goes, that's sort of been within the past 2 years alone. So first, I'm going to discuss how we got here and how it's come to affect us. So you really see a big uptick in government spending starting in the 30s under FDR for the New Deal programs. And, they were designed to help desperate people at the time, and I'm not saying that it was a bad thing either, or a good thing either. I really don't have a stance on that. But they were very expensive. At the time, they were about $50 billion, which divided amongst the populace at the time would have been about $150. And the debt was already in the billions at this time. And I mean, I know this doesn't sound like much, but by the time you add in inflation, that's about the equivalent of $1 trillion. Jim Powell, who is a writer at Forbes, said during the 30s, the old New Deal cost about $50 billion in federal expenditures from 1933 to 1940, excluding functions at the U.S. Post Office and the State Department. And this pattern of really excessive spending went on through the Second World War, which added about $340 billion in debt, or about $4 trillion, if you adjust for inflation. And I mean, you saw not as steep spending continue on through the Cold War with, nuclear arsenals and stuff, but it wasn't at those really record heights like it was during the Depression and the war. Till you get to about $1 trillion in 81. And it still kept on going, but it really, really has picked up in the past 20 some odd years with, the war on terror waging in the 2000s, and then a lot of the federal programs that have come out since then, like Obamacare, and a lot of the pandemic relief, especially over the past 2 years, that's cost exorbitant amounts of money, some $6 or $7 trillion in 2 years alone. So, all that being said, let's see, sort of how this has affected people over this period of time. So, people spend a lot of money these days. If you look at any statistic regarding debt on a consumer level, you can see it. Student loan debts are at all-time highs, car debts, credit cards, and so on. And so, it sort of makes you wonder if people see the government spend like they do, and wonder that, they can do the same. And Larry Light at Forbes writes, another way of looking at the issue is the immediate gratification has enormous appeal. The logic goes this way. Better to take what you can get today because you can't be sure it or you will be around tomorrow. And you see that really a lot, especially in the very consumerist culture we have now with Instagram and all these other sites just promoting the, I guess you call it, flexer lifestyle. And this sort of thing, as I stated earlier, has really affected people getting into their retirement because they're indebted for so long they can't save because they're tied up in their credit cards or their cars or their student loans or mortgages and so on. And, you see a dependence on Social Security and people aren't able to live out their retirements the way they want to, which adds a lot of stress. If people are worrying they won't have enough, and it could be attributed to the rise in divorce rates because money's the number one cause of divorce. And, that stress from having to live from paycheck to paycheck, it just wears on people. So to sum all that up, basically the government spending has sort of left the impression that that the average consumer can also spend this way. And, it's really affected us in not a good way. at all. You can only hope that one day we write this, but so far it's looking like it's just business as usual.